Alive on the mounjaro, it's on the pen alive, with your host David Knapp.
Thank you, clack, crack, and happy Thursday night. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, man on the mounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pan. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, mounjaro, zepbound, compound. Not for long, probably. That pen, that's what we talk about here at On the Pen Live. If you're new, welcome here. On the Pen is the internet's #1 stop for patient-centric news about obesity medicine. And we've been doing this live show every Thursday night now for, well, this is our 102nd episode. And we've got a great show tonight. We have got Lee from Lee Fits In, our de facto OTP legal expert. We're going to talk about some crazy developments in the OFA FDA trial that have transpired over the past 48 hours or so, including a document that was unsealed that the FDA submitted in response to the OFA's motion for preliminary injunction. So we're going to get into that a little bit. Of course, we've got our Maintenance Minute with Corey. We've got our Reddit recap with Allie, and then a wonderful conversation with a cardiologist. So it is February. It is Heart Awareness Month. Yesterday marked the 13th anniversary of a fatal heart attack that took my own father's life. And so obviously this health journey is very near and dear to my heart, a father of 4 children, and Heart Awareness Month is very near and dear as well. And I just had a absolutely delightful conversation with Dr. Simin Lee, who is a cardiologist and I would say obesity advocate, a wonderful, wonderful woman with just a brilliant mind and a sweet, compassionate heart. And we had a great conversation. I'm so excited to bring that to you a little bit later in the show. But as you're jumping in here, the ask that I have of you is twofold. The first thing would be to hit the thumbs up button, because that tells the algorithm that this is worth watching. So hitting the thumbs up button helps. And then we also know that anywhere from 30 to 60% of you that watch content on the Pen aren't subscribers. So what's holding you back? Please hit the subscribe button. Obviously, you've enjoyed enough content this far. Please help me and help grow this community by hitting the subscribe button as well. So thank you for those who are doing that. Even as we speak, a little shout out to those in the commies so far. Paul, welcome. Good to have you here. Justin, Spoonie Magumi, Sandra, Corey, Anna, Karen, Patricia, Round Mound of Zepbound, who was our guest last week. Good to see you here, Karen. J-Lo is in the house. Is that the J-Lo? Welcome, J-Lo. How's Ben? Sue the Dude. Appreciate you. Sabrina, who does host a bi-weekly GLP-1 panel, a live panel on the Pen. That takes place tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central. Be there and be square tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central. So we would love to see you there. I know Sabrina would. Those last 2 are available on demand. Just go to the channel and you can watch them. Just wonderful discussions, wonderful conversation. So if you're missing those, you're missing out, but you don't have to keep missing out, because you can go watch them on demand and you can catch it live tomorrow at 7 o'clock Central Time. Just a little housekeeping note too before we bring Lee in. I think this is worth mentioning because I feel so grateful for the community who advocated on my part. So let's just do just a tiny little housekeeping. So what is the housekeeping this week? Well, our book, you can see the giant version of it back here. Decoding GLP-1 is back on Amazon. The link is in the description of this video, or you can just go to glpbook.com. glpbook.com. It'll take you right to the book. It's back. It's back, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you for raising holy heck with Amazon, because I really think it made a difference. Two things that I really believe made a difference: the community reaching out and submitting complaints to Amazon, I think really helped. The other thing is the overwhelming amount of wonderful reviews that you all have left for the book. So if you picked up the book, great. Thank you so much. I know many of you have picked it up in the last couple of days. If you have not left it a review, please consider doing so, as who knows if this will happen again, but I believe the more reviews that we have, the better shot we have at getting it back if it ever goes away. I do have more copies coming, author copies coming on the way, just in case shenanigans happen again. But thank you. This, as I have mentioned before, this book is the work of my short career as a content creator. It was a heartfelt project that I really wrote because so many in the community were feeling like they could not share their journey with the people around them. And I wanted to give them a tool to open up that conversation, to foster and facilitate better conversations, better relationships. And I think that based upon what the community has told me, it is doing just that. So thank you for those who are doing that. And I just want you all to know from the bottom of my heart, I'm so appreciative. But without further ado, I want to bring in my friend Lee, because Lee has helped me to stay, like, anytime you see an update about the OFA FDA saga, just know that all of the information is being fed to me from this guy. He's got it first. So I'm going to welcome in Lee from Lee Fits In. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you for all the ways that you've contributed to helping us stay informed on the topic of the OFA FDA thing. Why don't you just bring us up to speed a little bit on what's transpired over the last couple of days and what we need to be looking for over the next few days?
Sure. And hi to everybody in the chat. Appreciate all your support too. This has been a busy week. But we kind of knew it was going to be busy, but I don't think we quite knew all the wrinkles that we ended up getting hit with. So the OFA filed their preliminary injunction motion 3 weeks ago, and that triggered the response time for Tuesday, the 18th.
Before you go on, let everybody who's not a lawyer know what a preliminary injunction is and what that means for the purposes of this case.
Yeah. So actually, this is pretty. The rumor is you have the smartest audience on YouTube. I don't know if you knew that, but everybody's saying it. So
just a little blatant pandering, no problem. We'll take it.
But you'll see in the news, you'll hear, especially with all these motions being filed with the Trump administration. So there's a stay. A stay means that things are put on hold for a very short period of time, usually days, maybe weeks at most. That's a little different. That just sort of is putting everything on pause. Then there's something called a preliminary injunction. That is sort of the same thing, meaning nothing can change. Everything needs to stay put, but it can last for months, usually not longer than that. But it's a more long-term pause. So if you hear that a judge puts a stay on something, usually that's a very temporary thing, can't really be appealed. It just puts everything on hold, and then they'll ask for a motion and a preliminary injunction. And the injunction meaning that the court is telling somebody they have to do something or not do something. They're enjoining them in their whatever it is they're being asked to do. So in this case, the preliminary injunction is seeking to keep the FDA from listing tirzepatide as the shortage as resolved. And so essentially and keeping the FDA from enforcing that as well. So it's kind of keeping everything where it is right now. Because right now, that even though if you go to the website on the FDA, it'll say resolved, nothing is happening with that because of this court case. Part of that's by the court order, part of it's by agreement of the FDA that they're going to wait until this plays out. And then the next thing that you could have is a summary judgment, meaning the court wants to decide the whole case and decide who wins at the end of the day. And you can have a permanent injunction too, but we don't need to get into that. So currently originally there was a stay, and then the court wanted to hear a motion for preliminary injunction. This is back in the fall. And then the FDA said, whoa, 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 we're going to take another look at it. Right. And then everything kind of put on pause. And then the FDA in late December said, okay, no, we're sticking with it. We're going to say it's resolved. And then that triggered the motion for a preliminary injunction from the pharmacies, the OFA. And the judge basically said, okay, everything stay on pause until we have this motion and hear this motion out. And the FDA agreed with that. So that's kind of the lay of the land for how we got to here. The OFA was then given all the material that the FDA gathered as part of its decision making, and they got to see it, even though it's private, confidential stuff. It's all redacted that we can't see it, but the OFA did get to see it. So then they put their motion together, and they filed a motion that's sealed, meaning that no one else can see it but the court, and then they file a redacted version with the confidential stuff blacked out. So the court then said, okay, FDA and Eli Lilly, you have 3 weeks to respond to that. And then once they respond, which happened this week, the OFA will have 1 more week to reply. So there's motion, response, reply. So that triggered on Tuesday. So a week from Tuesday is the 25th. Next Tuesday will be the final round of paperwork, filings, that kind of stuff. So this week we were expecting on Tuesday to get the FDA's response. That did come, but they filed it under seal and did not file a redacted version. So you just couldn't see it at all. And then we had the surprise kicker of, what do they say? Politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, Novo Nordisk, of all the people, Eli Lilly's one of their prime competitors, comes in and says, hey, leave my buddy Eli Lilly here alone. This is the shortage is definitely
leave my buddy Eli Lilly here alone. We like to work together on collusion. If you don't believe that, see the previous happenings that went on with price fixing and insulin. But right. I digress.
Right. No. I think it's a good point. These companies clearly collude. Look at them here. They have an interest in what's happening. There's only the 2 main players in this space. I know there's others who are working on other versions of GLP-1s and different things, and they're backing each other up, even though they're supposed to be competitors. So that's weird. So didn't see that coming. But Novo Nordisk's response, or it's called an amicus brief, which means friend of the court. They say, hey, court, I'm your friend. Let me give you some more information. We had that happen on the pharmacy side with IVM.
Right.
Filed an amicus brief. Anyway, so that happened. Nothing real surprising there. Basically, just backing up what Eli Lilly said. But we couldn't see the FDA's response, and really needed to see it because the OFA was saying, hey, you guys disregarded everything we were showing you. You didn't do a thorough job. You should have done rulemaking, really laying out why this whole thing is messed up. And without seeing the FDA's response, we're kind of shortchanged to know what the arguments are going to be. And now there's been a change in administration. And so part of me, I don't know, Dave, if you thought this, I was kind of like, well, let's see if the new administration has a little bit of a change of tune with how they're approaching this. I will say the main thing is Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk hammer on the safety. Oh, this is dangerous. Well, I got the sense from the FDA's filing today, when we were able to read through it, they seem to focus mainly on just supply and demand. They don't seem as harsh on compound.
Right.
There's a few little things they put in there, but.
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of build off of that, I agree. And it's like they couldn't really come after the safety of it, because if they were to come after the safety of it, it's like, why would they be allowing compounds at all?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were texting about that. Yeah, why would the FDA can't really say compounders aren't safe as a general principle, which is what Lilly and Novo do say. Essentially, if you read the Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, you wouldn't touch a compounded medication if your life depended on it.
Right. Right. And Novo Nordisk, the most brazen thing about all this was Novo Nordisk's quote, I thought, when they said that this is like the largest unconsented human experiment of our lifetime with
Oh
compounds.
yeah, man. The way
I
they
was like, oh, well, it's a pretty successful experiment if that's what it is. And yeah, I mean, I unpacked all of this in a couple of videos here on
you did.
YouTube.
Yep. So anyway, the problem for the OFA is that the FDA has very good lawyers, and their response was very good. It kind of picked apart a lot of the OFA's arguments, especially with the OFA has to show that the FDA, their decision making was arbitrary, capricious, meaning just had no foundation or basis, any kind of rational thought to it. It's a pretty low bar for the FDA to meet. And so the OFA has been saying they didn't even look at our stuff. They disregarded all this data. And so, they only took data from Eli Lilly and disregarded everything else to try and make it seem like they didn't really look into it at all. Well, the FDA's brief is like 35 pages long, and they go through all the data points that the OFA point to as what the FDA should have considered, and walk through how the FDA did consider it and decided that it wasn't persuasive enough to move the needle. And that's really all it has to show. It has to show that it made a thoughtful consideration of everything and made a decision. And if it's, unless it's completely baseless, it's generally going to be affirmed. So after I read that, I was like, oh boy, that ain't good. That's pretty much exactly what they needed to do, and they did it.
Yeah.
So,
It was a pretty big takedown of every single point the OFA had made. What I thought was in this whole thing, what I think is super frustrating is that obviously Eli Lilly, but the FDA just brushes off patient reports as like, that's not a real shortage, or there's not enough information from the patients to give enough context to know if it is actually a national shortage or just a shortage at the pharmacy level. And it's like, well, the FDA is the one that provides the report the shortage tool on their website, right? So if that information isn't complete or robust enough, that's because the FDA hasn't made it complete or robust enough.
Yeah.
And so I think, there's zero acknowledgement on their part that they just definitely brushed off the patient reporting as anecdotal, inconsequential, and not tantamount to a national shortage, just individual shortages at the pharmacy level, which that is a legitimate argument. Like, I think to set expectations with people, if you go to your pharmacy and they don't have it for you that day, that's not a shortage. It's a refrigerated medication, and an expensive one at that, one that most mom and pop pharmacies lose $25-50 every time you fill it because they don't get a full reimbursement from the PBM. So not only is it expensive for them to hold an inventory, but they lose money when they fill it. So they don't generally keep a huge supply of these on hand. But if you can't get it within 3 business days, then there's a problem at the distributor level, because most pharmacies will get a shipment from their distributor every couple of days. So, but again, it's the reporting mechanisms haven't built that nuance into it. So how can they just brush that off?
yes.
I feel like 503B compounded tirzepatide, when it comes to this case, is completely cooked. What say you?
Yep. Nope. I think so. I did a little video breakdown, and I posted on YouTube here too, because TikTok, I don't know how long that's going to be around, but yeah, that's exactly how I kind of ended the video, is reading through this. I mean, yeah, 503As, you could do some personalized prescriptions. You can add some vitamins in there. Maybe that gets you through, but yeah, mass production of this stuff is toast. And it's pretty clear that semaglutide is soon to follow. That's unfortunately where I feel like this is going. It's been a bit of a ride with the compound game, but I think it's going to be winding down.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think custom dosing will carry people along for a little bit, but it's just a matter of how willing these associations of compound pharmacies are willing to go to the mat with Eli Lilly, because I can already hear my own video a week from now or 2 weeks from now, breaking news: compound pharmacies have received cease and desist letters from Eli Lilly. Here's a copy. The whole thing, and just I might as well just
Yeah,
record it
this time
tomorrow.
it'll
So
have some teeth. And the FDA starts sending out letters.
yeah, and the FDA
That's
starts
when
their enforcement. Yeah. Now I will say that one of the things that I've been advocating for this year pretty strongly is that I really think that this new administration needs a whole of government approach to treating obesity. I don't think, there's a whole contingent of people who are just waiting for the new administration to round everybody up into fat camps. And it's a whole bunch of nonsense that people are coming up with. But
I saw some of that. Yeah.
yeah. Which, if you read about that, that's all has to do with RFK's background as a drug addict. These are things that he has in mind for people that are struggling with addiction. This isn't government fat camps.
Yeah.
But I digress. It makes for, I guess, interesting content. But I really do believe that this administration is taking the problem of obesity seriously. And if now is the time. Like it has to be now. So this administration needs to act, and they need to act aggressively. And so that's what we're advocating for here on depending on what that all looks like. I don't know, but they need to do something.
No, and that's why I don't want to come across as hopeless, because there are some really good things that we can still do. PBM reform being front and center, and then hope that RFK Jr. is and the FDA are going to be looking seriously at trying to figure out a way to make these more widely available in the name brand format. But because he says he's pro peptide, and that's what these are. So,
right.
It seems
right.
I am optimistic. I have to be.
Yeah, so. I agree. Same here. I say open up the floodgates on the peptides. Let the compound pharmacies cook. But I appreciate you kind of giving us the lay of the land. The one other thing that I thought was interesting, and I want to get your take on it too. I put a couple articles out about the Novo inserting themselves with the amicus brief, and then Lilly's response. One of the things about the Lilly response that I found sort of fascinating was they're citing Pharmakio, which is the co.
Oh, did I lose you?
Plaintiff. Can you hear me?
Yep, I lost you for a second. So
okay, so you're freezing up a lot on my end too. So, but I can still hear you just fine. Okay. The co-plaintiff, I don't know if I'm saying that right, is Pharmakio, and the Lilly response had some pretty egregious sanitation violations that they had been cited with, and even up to not sourcing their API from approved sources. Did you read that stuff?
And I'm not as familiar with them. But again, the problem is if we do have bad actors, it just feeds right into the narrative.
Yeah. Right.
And so the OFA seems to represent top-notch pharmacies. But I don't know as much about where those guys are coming from and their attempt to join in on this. So
yeah. So it'll all make for really great content to follow, and hopefully, again, like I like what you said, I'm right there with you. I have to be hopeful. Okay, all we can do is continue to advocate for PBM reform, for reform to our whole healthcare system, and for increased accessibility. And I'm still bullish that by the end of 2025, more people will be on these medications, not less. But we'll see. We'll have to see how it all plays out. Obviously, this trial seems like probably a big bump in the road towards accessibility, but hopefully the powers that be are, hopefully there's something in the works to help. So we'll see what happens, and hopefully you'll continue to follow this with us.
I will, man. All right. Take care, Dave.
Thanks, Lee. Lee fits in. Make sure you give him a follow over on TikTok and over here on YouTube. Lee is helping me to stay on top of that, so I really, really appreciate that. It's so helpful to hear from Lee on this stuff. I'm literally texting him in the middle of the day. He's probably in his trials, and I'm like, what does this mean? What's going to happen now? He's probably like, I have a job, Dave. But yeah, so thank you to Lee. We're going to continue moving right through because we got a lot to get to. We're already 25 minutes into the show. Let's hear a little bit about maintenance from the male perspective from Corey tonight with Corey's Maintenance Minute.
Hi, I'm Corey. If you're a man maintaining your weight with a GLP-1 medication like semaglutide or tirzepatide, you might be wondering how this affects your hormones, especially testosterone, which plays a huge role in energy, muscle mass, libido, and overall well-being. We know that obesity is strongly linked to low testosterone. That's because fat tissue, particularly around the abdomen, converts testosterone into estrogen, reducing the amount available in your body. The more fat you carry, the greater the imbalance. But the good news is that when you lose weight, especially visceral fat, this process slows down. In fact, research shows that even a modest 5 to 10% reduction in body weight can lead to a significant increase in testosterone levels, a shift that often improves energy, mood, and overall health. Now, while GLP-1 medications don't directly increase testosterone, they help in several ways. First, by promoting fat loss, they reduce that testosterone to estrogen conversion. Second, they improve insulin sensitivity, which is important because high insulin resistance is linked to low testosterone. And finally, many men report better energy, improved libido, and greater muscle retention, all of which are influenced by testosterone. And let's be honest, higher testosterone isn't just about muscles and motivation. It might even bring back that confidence you had when you thought you could fix everything with duct tape and a YouTube tutorial. But not all men experience the same results. If your testosterone was already low before weight loss, or if you're still feeling fatigued, weak, or just off, it may be a sign to get your hormone levels checked. And actually, even if you feel fine, it's a smart move to get lab work done automatically after significant weight loss. Having a baseline of your new hormone levels allows your doctor to track changes over time and catch any imbalances early. Beyond just optimizing your health, doing lab work proactively can also help with future insurance considerations. If you wait until symptoms arise, a sudden diagnosis of low testosterone could be viewed as a pre-existing condition, potentially complicating coverage. If your testosterone is still low, even after weight loss, there are several ways to optimize it. Strength training is one of the best natural ways to boost testosterone, and making sure you get enough protein and healthy fats is crucial for hormone production. Vitamin D and zinc also play a big role in testosterone regulation, and if levels remain low despite lifestyle improvements, medical options like testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, may be something to discuss with your doctor. I know some of you might be skeptical about getting lab work done, but think of it as this way. Getting your labs checked now means that in a few months, when you're feeling stronger, leaner, and more energized, you'll have actual proof to back up your bragging rights. And that is your Maintenance Minute.
A wonderful message from our friend Corey on testosterone. So something for the men folk tonight. Appreciate that, Corey, and I'm sure the men in the chat do as well. Give Corey some love for her contribution this week. Always a good one. I appreciate the time and effort you put into that each and every week, Corey. Thank you so much. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Row, without whom none of this happens. You can check them out, the Row Body program, especially if you are looking at getting on branded medication, want to take another look at the option of branded medication, and you want somebody who is really good at figuring out how to get insurance to cover it, look no further than the Row Body program. And if you want to just find out if you're covered, no strings attached, go to Row's Insurance Checker. Just do a Google search for Row Insurance Checker. They'll upload your insurance form there. They'll email you back and tell you what you're covered for, but they can always fight to try to get something covered for you as well. So Rowbody, row.co/OTP to learn more about the Rowbody program, where patients combined with lifestyle modifications and GLP-1s, where appropriate, lose 15 to 20% of their body weight in a year. Of course, if you're going to start a new medication, you want to pay attention to any potential side effects that come along with taking a new medication. All that is available at the Row website. Just visit row.co/OTP. You'll find everything you need to within a few clicks. Thank you, Row, for being the ones that bring this to us every week. I couldn't do it without Row, and I'm so thankful for their partnership of OTP. You know, the next thing that happens here is we got to talk about what's going on Reddit. And there is, if there's ever been sort of a poster child story for the reason that I wrote the book Decoding GLP-1, it is the story from Reddit this week. Because man, that it's the story that I've heard so many times in different forms. And so check out the conversation that's going on over at Reddit this week with this week's Reddit recap.
There was a story over on Reddit that really blew up, and I wanted to talk about it today because I feel like this is something that more and more of us are having to deal with, and it's challenging. Dealing with someone who's making comments about your weight at work. So in the Reddit post, this person specified that they had to fight very, very hard to get zepbound covered under their insurance. And I mention this only because it really illustrates the struggle that we all have when it comes to having access to these medications. So after working so hard to get access to the medication, then she started seeing results in the first 3 months, and coworkers started to notice. Now, for the most part, everyone was respectful, but there was one coworker that it slowly started to escalate into a problematic conversation. So at first, the comments started out with, "Are you losing weight? It looks like you've lost your butt." And then they quickly escalated to, "You better not be on one of those weight loss shots because those things are deadly poison." And then it escalated from there. Now, some of the things that this person said were a little bit disturbing, so I'm not going to repeat those to you. But needless to say, it escalated and it was ugly. Now, what can you do if you're in this situation? First and foremost, I recommend that you nip these type of conversations in the bud at the very beginning when they first happen, in the first or second time that they happen. Allowing them to escalate over time can be problematic, and just like for this Reddit poster, it can get worse as it goes on. So making sure that you address this with the individual in the beginning is going to be really important. Secondly, if you can put things in writing, that would be your best bet. If you could send this coworker an email and explain to them, "Hey, these conversations regarding my weight are making me uncomfortable. Please stop." You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to tell them your medical history. You don't have to tell them what you're doing. Just say, "This is what you're doing. It's making me uncomfortable. Stop." That's it. If that doesn't work, then it may be time to involve your manager or their manager, whatever the case may be. And then if that doesn't make it stop, then it's time to involve someone higher up, usually someone in HR. Now, I like to remind people that HR is not your friend. And I know all of my HR people are going to come for me now, but hear me out. In this situation, it actually works to your advantage. So HR is designed specifically to protect the company, and the company does not want to have a lawsuit. So if someone is creating an unhealthy or an unfriendly work environment, they are going to address it. Now, in most instances, people are faulty, right? And many, many times, if you're able to address things in the first or second time, people will be shocked and say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was upsetting to you. And they'll stop on their own. So even if you're somebody who is not a fan of conflict, sometimes addressing things early on can really be the best solution so that it doesn't escalate. I hope that you found this helpful. As always, this is Allie signing off on your Reddit recap.
Kevin, if you don't stop harassing me, I'm gonna turn you into HR. I'm gonna turn you in. Kevin, if you don't stop harassing me. Sushi, don't harass me. Otherwise, I'm gonna turn you into HR.
The best part about that is Allie's Metallica shirt. That and Kevin getting reported to HR. I hope that works out for Kevin. I think he was meaning well. I just think he was overcome with emotion. Yes, Sue, entrapment. What a wonderful Reddit recap. But again, like, there are so many people we encounter in the world around us that could use just a healthy dose of education. Maybe not the perfect situation to hand somebody a book, but definitely an extreme case of people who are just woefully uninformed about those weight loss shots. So yeah, that's why community is so important too, right? Having a community that you can go and share this to, like this person did, obviously on Reddit, in the Reddit community, and just sharing, what they're going through, because they're definitely not alone. And if you're feeling alone and isolated in this journey, know that you also are not alone. And we are so happy to have you here if you're listening. And I hope that you'll help the community grow. We're pushing to 20,000 over here on YouTube. So help us get there by hitting that subscribe button. And if you haven't, and thank you so much to our friends, Allie and Corey, for their contributions tonight and every night. Really appreciate the both of you. Now, without further ado, we've got a wonderful, wonderful interview. I'm so excited to bring this to you, and I know that you're going to enjoy it. So hit that thumbs up button, start smashing that love button, because we're bringing you tonight's hot channel. I'm so excited. Enjoy the conversation. Friends, Heart Health Month is a special one around here. You all know my story. My father passed away 13 years ago from a heart attack caused by heart disease, and it's just a very near and dear topic. Last year, we had the pleasure of having a couple cardiologists on during the month of February, and we're going to keep up the trend this year. I'm so excited tonight to be welcoming in a cardiologist from Boston. Her name is Dr. Simin Lee, and she is part of Simin Lee Health. She's going to be able to tell us all about that and all about her involvement there. But I'm super excited to introduce you to tonight's hot channel, Dr. Simin Lee.
Hot channel.
Dr. Lee, welcome to On the Pen.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's an honor to have you here. I'm so excited to chat with you about anti-obesity medications, GLP-1s, and heart health. First of all, can you just sort of introduce us to yourself and kind of give us a little bit about your background and a little bit about Simin Lee Health?
Absolutely. No, be happy to. So as you mentioned at the top, I'm a general cardiologist. I'm based in Boston. And I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. I was lucky to grow up in a family of doctors who didn't add a ton of pressure and just showed a good example of what it looks like to, feel fulfilled and feel like you're making a difference helping people. So drawn to it early, but also got a sense that there was this whole bigger picture of, healthcare, the system, outside of medicine. So I trained at Harvard in this joint medicine and business program. opened up my eyes to a lot of different ways that, you know, folks like you, people in this community that you engage, are able to make impact beyond just sort of the clinic and the examining room. So that was food for thought. Still went on to become a physician and fell in love with cardiology. It was the soulmate effect. I trained at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is one of the Harvard affiliated hospitals, now under this big health system, integrated health system called Mass General Brigham in Boston. I still practice today. I see patients about once a week, but during my training, you know, it really overlapped with COVID. And I just have this memory, this distinct memory of returning to in-person care for the first time. We were excited because, you know, we doctors had just been cooped up with each other, kind of, you know, cut off from everyone else who was bubbling and, you know, not knowing if we were, how much at risk we were and all of that. So we were really excited to just return to normalcy and see patients that we knew, that we loved. And one of the first patients I saw back in the clinic was a woman I'd known for years. And I'll never forget going into the room and and doing a double take and thinking, oh my God, am I in the wrong room? And I have the sheet of paper, I look down and it does say room, you know, 12 or whatever. And the person in front of me doesn't look anyone like the patient I've known for years. And that's because she had gained at least 35, if not 40 pounds. Her blood pressure was elevated on the sheet. I rechecked it. It was still elevated. We later saw her cholesterol was all over the place. She had developed diabetes. And this was something that we saw, you know, many of your listeners, your viewers will recognize and feels familiar. Our friends, our family members, ourselves, we were cooped up, we were stressed, we couldn't access care. And, you know, and we developed what's called cardiometabolic disease, this intersection between weight and all the risk factors that weight drives for heart disease. So, yeah. And so, you know, that really grabbed my attention because I started seeing it over and over and over again. And I started to think, well, gosh, there's not enough doctors and there's too many patients with these issues. There's no access to care. The wait times were so long, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months to get into our weight management or obesity medicine center at our, you know, incredible hospital and everything. So started to think maybe there's a better way to create access to care. And although I continue to see patients at this health system once a week, decided to jump out with my, you know, outside of that and try to build a more accessible virtual clinic, leveraging group virtual visits where many patients see a doctor and a health coach on something like Zoom, you know, feels very much like this. And you that way, you know, you can create access to treatments like GLP-1s or statins, blood pressure meds, while also fostering sort of community as medicine. So that's how Systole Health was born. Systole is the moment that all the heart cells squeeze together in unison to drive blood forward and nourish the body. And that felt analogous for what we're doing with group care. So that's a little bit of my journey. And, you know, I'm so passionate about the issues you discuss all the time with your viewers and your guests. And I know we have a lot to dive into, but that's a little bit on me and my background.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. A couple questions that pop up right away on the topic of Systole Health and kind of virtual visits and everything. So just, I think cardiology, my mind immediately goes to how are they measuring blood pressure? How are they, you know, doing EKGs? So I imagine there's some sort of medical device component to this as well.
To our model. Yeah, you know, we for patients who have high blood pressure or who we're not sure, we're a little suspicious that they might have high blood pressure. We, you know, work with them to acquire a cuff and support them in learning proper technique of measuring at home. We also have patients where they feel something, heart racing, extra beats, a little fluttering, and we help support them in, you know, using consumer tools to monitor themselves or work with their, you know, primary care, their local cardiologist to get some hospital grade monitoring done. Really, the big thing is that, you know, I think that it's 70% of the country now that's overweight or obese. And, you know, 1 in 2 people has high blood pressure. That's projected to go up to 60% of the population by 2050, which is very scary. Meanwhile, we just don't have enough specialists, enough cardiologists. There's only 8,000 in the country who are not of retirement age, but the median retirement age is like the median age right now is 55. So, you know, it's an aging workforce that's already too small. It's about to get smaller. So we need, and we've seen, you know, some work by my colleagues has shown that 1 in 2 counties in the United States is a cardiology desert, doesn't have good access to cardiovascular care for what still is, for not just women, which is my focus, but men too, the leading cause of death today. So, I think these kinds of care models where we can make care more accessible is more important than ever. And that's why I decided to do a startup instead of, some of the clinical trials research, for the work that I'm sure we'll talk about today that my colleagues do.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that background. I think one of the things that's cool about your model is, and I'm just going to speak from my own perspective rather than broad generalizations, but as a man, I think one of the things that we're always hesitant to do is to go see a doctor when we're concerned about something.
Yeah.
There's just like, I don't know what it is, but I know I'm not alone in it.
Yeah.
And what I like about it is there's something much more approachable about a Zoom meeting, and then a face to face going into the doctor. Like I myself have noticed. I was in the last job that I had before I was doing this full time. I was selling X-ray equipment, and I noticed that every time I would step into a hospital, which I was stepping into hospitals every day, I would almost have like a visceral reaction to it because of the time that we spent in the hospital with my own dad, which just kind of brought back a flood of these just like almost like just panic and nervousness and anxiety. And so for me, just the thought of going to a doctor sometimes can be extremely overwhelming to me because of the feeling that I get being in hospital. I like the approachability of it from the standpoint of you kind of take away the white coat syndrome a little bit.
Yes.
And it's sort of disarming. And so I think
Yeah.
I think it's really cool what you're doing. A couple
Thank
questions
you.
too that kind of popped up too. Um, we talked about getting back into the office after COVID and seeing patients and noticing. It sounded like what you said, if I was tracking with you, is that you noticed a huge uptick in patients who had gained weight and developed type 2 diabetes,
Or some form of insulin resistance.
metabolic
A lot,
disease.
yes, yes. And we call this, the American Heart Association, I think at the end of 2023, released a presidential advisory, like this big paper that was meant to make waves and get a lot of attention, saying, here's the term, people. It's not just obesity, and it's not just, heart disease risk factors. It's cardiometabolic disease. There's a biology to this. It starts with excess weight that the body just doesn't handle appropriately or store appropriately, that gets deposited on our organs inside our body, leading to their dysfunction. And that shows up as insulin resistance, as high blood pressure, fatty liver disease, kidney disease, diabetes eventually, sleep apnea, and then if that goes unaddressed, it progresses to what we call subclinical cardiovascular disease, where you might have calcified blockages, positive calcium score, that are there. You might have a stiff heart and the makings of heart failure. You're not in the hospital, you haven't had a heart attack yet, but it's the biology is happening. And then of course the last stage is what your father went through and what none of us, what we all hope to prevent, which is the heart attacks, the strokes, the heart failure, the arrhythmias. And so the term is for that weight heart health connection is cardiometabolic disease. And what we felt like we were seeing coming out of the pandemic was a tsunami of that. And it hasn't, with honestly, because of the obesity epidemic continuing to march on, it feels like, we thought, okay, was this just because everyone was cooped up during COVID, couldn't exercise, stressed out, a lot of us eating our feelings and everything like that, or is this really part of a public health issue that's ongoing? And increasingly, we think
do you see this kind of I don't want to say emergence of cardiometabolic disease, but this spike maybe in cardiometabolic disease? Do you see it as being more related to the lockdowns and people being cooped up and eating their feelings, or do you see it as being more related to the virus itself?
Oh, I think, there's less evidence that it's in any way related to the virus or the vaccines. The main, things that we see in that realm are inflammatory, like a little inflammation around the heart, which we call pericarditis. Sometimes inflammation of the heart muscle itself, sometimes clots, leg vein clots or lung clots. But really, a lot of this cardiometabolic disease, we initially thought was because of the shock to our lifestyle during the shutdowns. But then, it hasn't abated. In fact, it's gotten worse. We see now it's not whatever it was, 50, 60% of the population, but 70% of our entire society that's overweight or obese. And, the proportion of hypertensive patients is just going up and up. Same with diabetes and prediabetes. So we have a lot of work to do. And I know your focus has been on this revolutionary treatment category. Unfortunately, what we see is that it can be, one stone that can kill, multiple birds and really help across several dimensions of cardiometabolic health.
Yeah. Excellent. One of the things that I am very curious to know when you talk about the trajectory of not only the obesity rates, but sort of the cascading comorbidities and cardiometabolic disease, as you mentioned. When you talk about the trajectory of that 10, 20, 30, 40 years, how do you see this emergence, to kind of bring it back home to On the Pen? How do you see this emergence of super potent anti-obesity medications impacting that trajectory? Is it as dire, given the advancements of treatments, as you kind of laid it out earlier, or do these have the potential to really change that trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, my opinion as someone who views GLP-1 medications as a cardiovascular tool, is that they are a complete game changer. Biologically speaking, sort of medically, scientifically, we feel like we're living in a watershed moment, where every month, and I'm sure your viewers and listeners feel the same way, it feels like every month there's some new study, new story showing yet another benefit. A lot of these have to do with cardiovascular and cardiometabolic health. We've seen, obviously, the weight loss. We've seen the effects on the treatment of type 2 diabetes. We've seen the prevention of progression from prediabetes to type 2 diabetes, sleep apnea reversal, fatty liver disease reversal, slowing of progression of kidney disease, which is an underappreciated input into cardiovascular risk. And then, things like actual improvement in quality of life, symptom burden for heart failure, not to mention reduction in heart attacks and strokes and cardiovascular death for people who already have had events like that in the past. So, for us, it feels like the kind of thing that could turn those graphs that just keep marching in the wrong direction into the right direction. The big challenge has been, the system that we live in, some of the incentives we have around research and development, patents, and therefore pricing. So access has been the major limiter. But of course, as you have profiled, there are, newer products coming through the pipeline and ultimately to market every year. And as, the number of options gets bigger and bigger, there'll be more competition and downward pressure on pricing. So our hope is that this really is the beginning of getting a grip on what is an epidemic. It's an epidemic.
Absolutely. One of the things we've been advocating for at On the Pen this year is, just for the new administration. Like, I think the next 4 years are so critical when it comes to access and really getting control and a handle on the obesity epidemic in this country. And unfortunately, the patent stuff and the accessibility is all a major factor. And what I would like to see is a whole of government approach to obesity, the same way that we saw the government mobilize against the coronavirus. Like, I think it's that serious. We need to have executive action on obesity. We need to have executive action on accessibility. What all that looks like, I don't know, but it needs to be taken that seriously. And just today, just on a topic that kind of overlaps with what we're talking about, we learned that Eli Lilly actually spent a great deal of money in the second half of 2024 to make orforglipron, which is their oral small molecule, in phase 3. So they have a war chest already of inventory of orforglipron. And the exciting thing about that one is the scalability, because when we talk about accessibility, supply is a big part of that. But weight loss, when you talk about just weight loss for non-diabetic patients, very close to what high-dose semaglutide trials are seeing in an oral. So
at a more affordable cost to manufacture. So,
to
you know,
manufacture, and
yeah,
hopefully more affordable for patients too. That part remains to be seen. But as you mentioned, especially once we get new companies into the game, so it's not just a duopoly of obesity medicine. Hopefully, that does put some serious downward pressure on the cost of these medications.
absolutely. But there's no question they have been a real game changer. They have empowered. I mean, previously, I think, you know, I think about when I would have seen someone struggling with obesity. They have all of the cardiovascular problems related to obesity. We saw them in our office. What would we do? We would refer them to the weight management center, our obesity medicine clinic, you know, condemning them to wait 18 to 24 months to be seen by somebody who would, you know, maybe offer them like phentermine, which has adverse cardiovascular effects like raising blood pressure and increasing heart rate. And or to, you know, maybe offer a bariatric surgery referral, or just, you know, more focus on lifestyle for someone who likely has been struggling with lifestyle modification their entire lives.
Right.
So that's what we would do before. And then I'll just never forget, you know, sitting in clinic, you know, and during that transition back to in-person care, seeing this, you know, tidal wave of patients struggling with these issues, at which weight was at the core. And my mentor, who by the way was my grandmother's cardiologist, so I'll never forget, he was saying, look, you know, we could refer them to obesity medicine and have them wait forever, or we can just prescribe these medications ourselves. You know, we have seen the data. These are not just diabetic medicines. They're not just obesity medications. We saw in the clinical trials looking at type 2 diabetes that there were already cardiovascular benefits, reductions in what we call MACE, major adverse cardiovascular events. And, you know, he said, why not? And so we started, and obviously, you know, did some consulting with our colleagues whenever, you know, something that we weren't sure about came up. But it's kind of, you know, it's not rocket science, and it was a very meaningful way to help our patients, who then a few months later come back looking, you know, externally transformed, feeling internally transformed, saying things like, you know, I feel like I can look at myself in the mirror again, or, you know, I finally feel like myself again. I used to love dancing. I couldn't do it for years, and now I've been dancing. And then to also be able to feel like, wow, I can take away medications now. You don't need your blood pressure medication anymore. And to make them feel more alive, you know, and in the driver's seat for their own life. So it's been amazing. It's been really, I'll never forget these early moments of, you know, what is sort of a catalytic moment in medical history.
Absolutely. I am curious, when you talk about all of the benefits and you explain your patients, really the phrase that I use over and over when I've interviewed people who have lost over 400 pounds on a GLP-1 alone.
Wow.
No surgery, just straight GLP-1. I mean, I always refer to this as just the best way to couch it is that people are getting their life back. And it is really fascinating and wonderful to watch somebody tell their story who has really gotten their life back with these medications. I am curious though, when you talk about, you know, sort of sounds like you guys were some of the forerunners in prescribing these for cardiovascular health. Do you see any benefit for maybe the use of a form of GLP-1 or incretin mimetic as a prophylaxis to developing cardiometabolic disease?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that those trials are coming, looking at the application of these treatments in people who, you know, maybe by BMI, which we know is a very problematic way of defining, you know, the basically separating people out into true clinical obesity, or what increasingly people are calling preclinical obesity. You know, but I'm sure the trials are coming looking at people who don't have an overweight or obese BMI, and to see what happens, you know, to their cardiometabolic health. My suspicion, my hypothesis is that we would observe the benefits that we're seeing in patients who do have preclinical or clinical obesity, that we would see prevention of, you know, the development of those conditions of insulin resistance. It's hard. It might take more patients, a larger trial and a longer time frame of observation. So it might be a more expensive research study to run. But my suspicion is that is what we would see. You know, doctors occasionally will joke about things that they wish were, or that they might wonder if they would ever sort of go into the water supply. And, it'll be things like aspirin, which we now know actually can cause bleeding and is not worth the bleeding risk unless you really had a heart attack or a stroke. Cholesterol lowering medications are often top of the list. But now people talk about that it seems like almost anyone stands to benefit in some way. And we are really focused on just using the evidence to guide us. I think that is an important thing, not necessarily being cowboys and giving it to people who we don't have good scientific evidence of the highest quality that it will help at a low risk of harm. That's an important thing. So, letting the evidence guide us, but, really driving this revolution forward as much as we can.
Excellent. I appreciate the answer. I think if I were a medical provider, I would definitely have to be wrangling my inner cowboy because I would always want to be trying new things and testing things out. But I do understand it's super important to be led by the science on this stuff. I do think that if the science does go that direction in terms of clinical trials for prophylaxis, like we saw that tirzepatide in the longest study for tirzepatide, 99% of people with prediabetes didn't get it.
Amazing.
So seeing more of those trials, I think, would be great, because I think what these medications are showing from an inflammation reduction alone seems to be quite beneficial, and maybe even at small doses would be beneficial for people without obesity. So I'll be interested to see where that goes. I am curious, one of the questions that we were chatting about before we came on, I'm curious to know from a cardiovascular health standpoint, when we talk about GLP-1s, and in my mind, I go specifically to semaglutide because I just remember hearing more about that, but it could be both semaglutide and tirzepatide. Are the cardiovascular benefits simply because people are losing weight, and then there's a cascade of cardiovascular benefits, cardiometabolic benefits that come out of that? Or is there specifically in the heart, is there something happening with the molecule, and is there something happening, chemically, or I'm not even sure if I'm phrasing that right, but do you understand what I'm saying? Is there something else happening besides the weight loss that's improving metabolic and cardiovascular health?
This is such a great question, and one that we are honestly wrestling with all the time. But basically, let's start with one of the biggest clinical trials that can offer some insight here. This is the SELECT trial, which was published in a leading medical journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, at the end of 2024. And what they did was, this was the first trial that looked at a GLP-1 in patients with heart disease. None of them had type 2 diabetes. I think most of them had pre-diabetes. Some had, no insulin, demonstrable insulin resistance, but they had all had something in the cardiovascular realm in the past: a heart attack, a stroke, a stent, surgery for their heart, blockages in their legs, that kind of thing. And what was amazing is that their blood pressure was pretty good. It was very close to controlled on average. Their LDL cholesterol was around 80, very good, almost at the goal of less than 70 for people in this category. They were on, for the most part, medications that any cardiologist would stand behind. And yet, on top of that, those randomized to semaglutide had a 20% lower risk of having another heart attack, another stroke, or cardiovascular death. It's amazing. And I remember I was part of a little group that Novo Nordisk sponsored, clinicians of every form, pharmacists, nurses, physicians, all trying, with some kind of academic activity in this realm or clinical practice in this realm. We're trying to predict before the results were published what the results would be. None of us guessed an effect size this big. We thought, they're on an aspirin, they're on a statin. How much better can you do? We were humbled. And I think to this, this is all to the circling back to your question, is it just because of the weight loss? Because they lost over a 40-month period, they lost the amount of weight that we see in the other semaglutide trials looking at obesity, somewhere in that 10-15% range. But what was really incredible is that the curves, the sort of, risk curves for people in the placebo group versus semaglutide, they separated very early, like actually right away, before a meaningful amount of weight loss that we usually expect to move the needle on blood pressure, to move the needle on cholesterol, to move the needle on sleep apnea could even take effect. So that suggested to our field that there's something more direct, that some part of the mechanism is directly affecting the cardiovascular system and influencing the benefit that we observed in that study, in addition to weight loss and the cardiovascular and cardiometabolic benefits of weight loss. And so what could that be? I mean, we know that these medications help with relaxing the blood vessels, as well as helping the heart to secrete something called atrial natriuretic peptide, which is like your own body's blood pressure medication. It helps the kidney flush out salt, and with that, extra fluid. So these two things together, these two well-described features of GLP-1 medications, maybe some hypothesize are helping reduce blood pressure, and that might be why we see that early separation of the curves, and why some of the benefit might be happening on top of what we get from weight loss. So we'll learn more as time goes on. And, the Eli Lilly is conducting a version of this looking at tirzepatide. So every new study will refine our understanding of how they help. But right now, what we know is that they really help for this population.
I am very curious to see if those same sort of separations, are seen with tirzepatide, because tirzepatide is way more a GIP analog than it is a GLP-1 analog, whereas semaglutide is just a straight GLP-1. I'm just curious to know, maybe there's something magical about GLP-1. I know that they're looking at similar things with retatrutide, so which is actually interesting. And I'm curious what your take on that one is, because retatrutide has glucagon, which is actually a cardiac stimulant. What have you looked at the retatrutide data much?
My most familiar with just phase 2 studies showing the incredible mean weight loss, but we're eager to see the phase 3 results and to learn more about what to expect when this hits the market. But just like we were talking about before, the more treatments that become available, whether it's oral, whether it's injectable, whether it's amylin or GLP, GIP, glucagon, like the better this will be for patients. More options is good for accessibility.
100%. The future is bright with obesity treatments. One last thing I want to ask you before we go. Earlier in the conversation, you were talking about preclinical obesity and then clinical obesity, kind of hearkening back to the Lancet Commission's sort of new definitions for obesity. Just real quick, what are your top line thoughts about the new definitions that they're using? And if they're deficient in some way, how do you see them as deficient? What do you think we can do better in the future?
I love the new definition because it feels like a more accurate representation of what we understand about the pathophysiology of obesity. For those of your viewers or listeners who aren't familiar, the Lancet, is this really, top-notch medical journal. They commissioned a group of researchers to really examine the way we define obesity. And this group of researchers just last month published a very big, statement and report saying BMI is inadequate. It doesn't really capture whether we have excess fat, where that fat is distributed, and whether that fat is causing damage to our organs or to our quality of life. And all of those things are inherent to the definition of what we as scientists and physicians understand obesity to be. So they came up with this framework of, clinical and preclinical obesity, where the key boxes to check or questions to ask are, does this person have excess fat? We all have fat, but do we have excess fat? Is it causing damage or harm in some way to our organs or to our quality of life with symptoms? And so, we look at imaging, we look at our physical exam, and we say, do we see fat on the organs? Is somebody apple-shaped or pear-shaped? Do they have, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, high cholesterol, or heart failure? Something that very commonly stems from obesity, particularly of the stiff heart failure variety, which we call HFpEF. And so, we look at all of that together and say somebody has clinical obesity where they have all those things, or they have excess fat and it's very clear, but they don't yet have the damage from it. And that's preclinical. I think this is a more accurate way to look at it. The medical community is on board. I think, to your question, if there's anything to nitpick or sort of a question, a concern to raise here, it might be around the pragmatic aspect. Obviously, from the perspective of a physician trying to, hit buttons as they're writing notes and saying this is the diagnosis the patient has, and from the health plan side of things, trying to categorize people into buckets and understand their members and what they'll cover, not cover, and how much they'll cover. BMI, even though it's super flawed, is very easy. It's a number. But preclinical obesity, clinical obesity, that's going to hinge a lot more on the physician or the nurse practitioner, PA's assessment and how they document it. So if I had to, express a concern, it would just be around how does this get put into practical use? How does this affect things like access to treatments because of coverage and the way that health plans understand this new definition?
I appreciate. I've read a lot of different takes and a lot of different opinions about it. I think it's super complicated because it's such a nuanced disease, and it affects so many different things. In fact, just this week I was reading a study on the different types of fat cells, and there's some commission over in Israel, the Ben Gurion University or something. I'm trying to remember where it came from, but it was very fascinating because it talked about the different fat cells, some being pro-inflammatory, some being anti-inflammatory, some being obviously a visceral fat around your organs, not the same as your,
subcutaneous fat under the skin.
Yeah, and it's just the future of how we can treat obesity on a more individualized treatment plan, not just like here's a weight loss shot.
Yeah.
Here's actually genetically what's going on. Here's
Yeah.
the type of fat that you've accumulated, and here's the best approach to getting rid of it. And so I'm very hopeful. I'm glad that they're looking at this. I'm glad that it's progressing. I think everything seems to be progressing in the right direction. I would love to see a day where the disease of obesity or cardiometabolic disease is treated similarly to somebody who develops a form of cancer.
Yes.
They're given an individualized treatment plan. There's genetics involved. Precision medicine. Yeah. So I think that's where we're going, and I'm hopeful and I'm thankful for the folks who are paving the way in medicine, like yourself, and on the front lines, giving patients what they need to live better, healthier, longer lives. And so really appreciate you joining us tonight and giving us some of your time. It's very generous of you. Can you let everybody know where they can find you on the interwebs here?
Yes. So our website, SicelyHealth.com. And I'm on social media, Sicily MD for TikTok, Sicily Health on Instagram and YouTube. And welcome anyone reaching out if they have a question. It's American Heart Month, so we hope this is top of mind, just the way it is for you based on your story that you shared with your father's history. And so if you ever have doubts, if you have questions, you want to run through something, I'm always happy to do that for any friends of the show.
So appreciate that, Dr. Lee. Thank you again for giving us some of your time. Hope you have a great evening, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Take care, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Dr. Simin Lee. That was one of my favorite conversations that I've had in a long, long time on the topic of GLP-1s. It's always such a pleasure to be able to talk to people who are so smart. She's the type of person who I literally could have kept here all day and all night just chatting away. So I'm very thankful that somebody with such a full schedule and so much to offer the world chose to give some of her time to offer some of what she has to give to this On the Pen community. So give Dr. Simin Lee and Sistali Health a little love in the chat tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining tonight and being a part of the chat and the community. You all make this worth it. And also on this week is the 13-year anniversary. Again, I mentioned this at the top of the broadcast. 13th anniversary of my father's heart attack that would take his life about 9 days after he had his heart attack. He left this earth. And I just want to take a moment and acknowledge him and the impact that he had on my life and the big part of who he was that plays into who I am today. And I have no doubt that he would be in absolute awe of what we have created here at On the Pen, and on not only at On the Pen, but my family, my children, my wife, just this life that I always tell people. It's not my line, but whenever anybody asks me how I am, I always say better than I deserve. And my goodness, that is definitely the case. So just an acknowledgement to my dad and everything that he meant to me. I know that there are those of you who are in the chat tonight who have probably also lost maybe your father, mother, loved one to cardiovascular disease. I am so thankful for people like Dr. Simin Lee, who has given her life to help extend the lives of others and to use and leverage her God-given gifts and abilities to learn and practice medicine to help people. So I know what we're doing here at On the Pen is helping people. I know one of the things that I was thinking about today as I was kind of reminiscing on the week and the show and everything, I was thinking about how it's very easy as a content creator to get caught up in the metrics and the numbers. Did you all notice that I took my hoodie off and switched my hat, by the way? It's so easy to get caught up in the numbers, and numbers are, they're a great metric. The more people that you can reach, the better, right? That's why we always say hit the thumbs up button. Thanks for helping us get to 100 likes tonight. Helping us get to 20,000 followers. Numbers are important because the more people you can help, the better. But what matters is just the one, right? If one person watches this show tonight, if you're a content creator and one person watches your content and gets treatment because of what they saw, reaches out to get help or learns about something that could help them because of the content that you create or the comment that you left or the post that you put up, you've done your part, my friend. And so my heart goes out to anyone in the chat who has lost a loved one. But just a little word of encouragement to any of you who are out there making content. It matters. It matters. And it matters a lot. And so many people are coming into the fold here and learning about these medications because of the type of content that we make here at On the Pen. And I'm just so honored to have this platform. And I know that my own dad would be quite proud. Just looking at the things behind me, the Iowa Podcast Award, the People's Choice Award, the Fortune magazine article, the book that we published this year. I mean, it all represents something very, very meaningful to me. So a little interesting on the Pen Live. I don't usually interact a ton with the chat, but I just have to interact with this one. Rez, who has been a wonderful contributor to our live streams lately, said, bizarre fact, back in the 80s, my grandfather set the record for a human that has survived the most heart attacks. Rez, the obvious question that we all have is, how many heart attacks did he survive? Right? This is where I'm veering a little off course here, but I was watching a interview. Does anybody know who Bert Kreischer is? He's a comedian. Real crass. 21 heart attacks. Wow. Anyway, that's amazing. That's amazing. But he was interviewing Ric Flair. Do y'all remember Ric Flair? Like, I grew up watching like the WWE, the WCW as a kid. And yeah, he was talking about how he went into the doctor, and the doctor's like, "How have you been feeling?" And he's like, "I don't know, I've been feeling all right." And he goes, "Well, I hope you know you've had a heart attack in the last year." I didn't realize people could have heart attacks and not even know that they have heart attacks. Rez says, does anybody want to know what he died from? I'm gonna guess it was something silly, like he got hit by a bus or something. I'm gonna guess not a heart attack. That's my guess, Rez. But you're gonna have to tell us while we wait for Rez to respond. Just want to thank you again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at On the Pen. I hope that you know that we have a Discord channel. And after we go live on this, we have a post game chat over on the Discord. So make sure that you join us over on the Discord. And everybody always says, how do you get there? What's Discord? Well, it's just a glorified chat room. It's like the 2025 version of a chat room. It's very easy to get to. Just go to onthepen.com and scroll towards the bottom. You'll see a Discord thing and you can join it there. We like to chat for a few minutes after we go live here and just kind of keep the conversation going. So if that intrigues you, join the Discord. There's over 500 people there. And we always like to have a conversation, keep the conversation going there after a live stream. Rez, I'm running out of things to say. So you better indulge us with what Grandpa ended up passing away from. Rez, who's in the comments to catch you up, her grandfather holds the world record for the most survived heart attacks at 21. And now we're learning that he died of a hemorrhagic stroke and was on because of the blood thinners he was on because of the heart attacks. Go figure. My goodness. Well, God rest Grandpa Rez Q Ninja soul. God rest my dad's soul and all of the loved ones who have gone before us. May we live longer and fuller lives because we are informed and empowered to have more competent and confident conversations with the medical providing team, in part because of what you've learned here from On the Pen. Now for this week, my friends, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he cause his glorious face, his light and countenance to shine upon you and be so gracious to you. Have a great week, my friends. We'll catch you on the Discord after party. Can't wait to see you there. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. And we'll catch you on the next one.